It was winter in a small town in the United States, with streetlights casting a faint glow on the snow-covered ground. In the cold air, Lily sat in the living room of the traditional American house she had recently bought with her husband, David. She gazed out the window, watching as gray clouds swirled in the sky. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell broke the stillness of the space. It was her mother-in-law, Margaret, a powerful woman with silver hair and sharp, cold eyes. Although Lily had been living with David for 3 years, she still couldn't fully integrate into his family. During family gatherings, Margaret often had critical remarks, frequently reminding Lily that she wasn't a biological daughter and would never truly be a member of the family. Today, Lily sensed that something would be different. When Margaret entered the living room, her gaze was no longer the same as usual, sharp and cold, but rather filled with surprise and a hint of confusion. "Lily, I need to talk to you for a moment," Margaret said, not looking Lily in the eye. Lily looked at her, trying to maintain a smile, though a sense of unease lingered inside her. "Is something wrong, Mom?" "This isn't easy to say," Margaret began, her voice trembling. "But I think it's time to face the truth." Lily felt a quiet fear spread inside her. "What is it, Mom?" Margaret paused, then turned to face Lily. Her eyes, no longer cold, were unexpectedly warm. "You need to know something. I don't think this child is actually blood-related to us." Lily froze, unable to believe what she had just heard. A wave of emotions rushed over her: shock, confusion, and anger. She didn't know how to react. This was a huge blow to her, especially since they had just discovered she was pregnant a few weeks ago, and the family was excited about welcoming the new member. "What do you mean by that?" Lily finally managed to say, but her words caught in her throat. Margaret didn't respond immediately. She just turned her face away, as though deep in thought. As the atmosphere in the room grew heavier, David walked in from the hallway. He stood still at the door, his face puzzled as he saw the seriousness on both his mother's and Lily's faces. He approached, taking Lily's hand, but still unsure about what was going on. "Lily, what is Mom saying? What's going on?" David asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Lily looked into his eyes, feeling the pain in her heart, but she didn't know how to explain. Their relationship had already been difficult lately, and now they faced a huge challenge from his family. At that moment, a middle-aged man, the family doctor, entered with a serious demeanor. "Sorry, I don't want to cause anyone distress, but there's something I need to clarify." Lily looked at the doctor with suspicion. She didn't know why he was appearing now, but then she realized this could be the truth that Margaret had been referring to. The doctor stepped forward, holding an envelope clearly containing the results of the test they had done earlier. "I've reviewed the test results. Actually, there's something everyone needs to know. This child is not David's." The room was so quiet that the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. No one said anything for several seconds, only the sound of Lily and David's heavy breathing breaking the silence. A sense of tension spread throughout the room. Margaret sat there, looking at her son and daughter-in-law, her face like stone, but her eyes betrayed signs of exhaustion and worry. David stood up and took a few steps toward the table, looking at the envelope the doctor had just placed down. He bent over and ran his hand across its surface, as if hoping for a clearer answer, something that could help him understand the truth that was crashing in. "Lily, do you understand? How did this happen?" David asked, his voice full of confusion, his eyes pleading with his wife. Lily felt as if she were trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. She didn't know how to explain, how to face this truth. The feeling of betrayal was rising within her, but she couldn't accept that David wasn't the father of the child. "You have to believe me." "I don't know why this is happening." Lily shook her head, her voice trembling. "This is the test result, right, doctor? There must be some kind of mistake." The doctor remained silent, his face serious. "The test results are clear, Lily. This is not a mistake. Both I and my colleagues have double-checked all the data. This is the truth. David turned around, his eyes filled with despair. Then whose child is this? Whose child is she if not mine? He exclaimed, his voice bitter. Lily looked at the doctor, her eyes full of pleading. She couldn't lose the baby. She couldn't lose everything. She couldn't lose this family. But the doctor didn't immediately explain. Instead, he silently opened the envelope, took out a sheet of paper, and began reading. "Doctor, please don't scare me," Lily said, her voice almost choked. The doctor looked up, his eyes showing surprise and a little fear. "Lily, I've reviewed the entire result, and I discovered something unexpected. This child is David's, but—" Margaret sat up straight, her gaze beginning to tighten. "But there's something else, right, doctor?" "Yes," the doctor continued. "There's one detail I've never seen in the tests before. This child is indeed David's, but not from the mother of the child now." Lily felt her head spin. "What?" "I don't understand what the doctor is saying." The doctor stared into her eyes, not blinking. "This may surprise you, but the test results show that this child is David's. But from another woman." Margaret's gaze flicked across Lily's face, then looked at her son. The truth was now clear, and she had to face the unbelievable. "That's what I've been trying to say," Margaret finally spoke up. "I've suspected this for a long time, but couldn't say it. This child isn't just a child. It's part of a secret that the whole family has been hiding." David stood frozen, his hands clenched tightly. It felt like a storm was sweeping over him, but he still couldn't accept it. "Mom, I don't understand." "What are you saying? Why are you saying these things?" "David, I'm not saying this without reason," Margaret said, her voice now carrying an unusual authority. "She's not the mother of the child, but she has a special connection with our family." David looked at her, confusion and fear written all over his face. "Then who is the mother of the child? And what is this special connection?" The doctor raised his hand, signaling for David and Lily to sit down. "We need to talk more about the past. This isn't simple, and it could change everything you know about your family." Everything had become more ambiguous than ever. Lily felt like her heart had stopped beating. Unanswered questions flooded her mind. Was the child inside her really David's? Or had everything been a game she had never realized? "Doctor, please clarify," Lily demanded, her voice firm despite the confusion still swirling inside her. "We need to dig deeper into what happened before," the doctor said, his eyes now showing not seriousness, but worry. "Because I've found a secret in your family's history." The atmosphere in the room was now not only silent, but so heavy that no one could breathe. Lily still couldn't believe what the doctor had just revealed. Everything felt like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The baby inside her, something she had dreamed about for so long, had now become a part of a secret that even David's family couldn't have imagined. The doctor took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving the family sitting before him. "This story is not easy, but you need to understand that it's related to an unexpected encounter in your family's past. An encounter that even David knows nothing about." David sat still, his hands resting on his knees, his face empty. His entire world seemed to have just collapsed. He turned to Lily, his eyes both stunned and confused. "So whose child is this really? And what is this special relationship the doctor is talking about?" The doctor took a deep breath and slowly spoke. "The truth is, this child is the result of an affair from your family's past. An affair that David never knew about." Lily felt as if she were falling into an abyss. An affair? She couldn't believe her ears. "But I don't understand. How could this child be the result of an affair that David knew nothing about?" "And that affair is directly related to Margaret," the doctor said, his words exploding like a bomb in the stillness of the room. Lily turned to look at Margaret, whose face stiffened as if she had been preparing for this question for a long time. "Mom, did you know about this?" David asked, his voice trembling. Margaret looked up, her cold gaze unable to hide her embarrassment. Yes, I knew. Lily stared at her, unable to believe what she was hearing. David's mother, what are you saying? Why didn't you tell me about this before? Why have you been hiding everything? Margaret remained silent for a long while before slowly speaking up, because I didn't want you to have to face this truth. It's too big a secret, and I didn't want the family to fall apart over something from the past. David stood up, unable to stay still any longer. Mom, what are you talking about? I don't understand. How could this child be the result of an affair from our family? Margaret sighed softly. It was over 20 years ago, when I was young. I had an encounter with a man, and this child is the result of that encounter. Lily listened, unable to fully grasp what Margaret was saying. She felt her mind spinning. How could a story from the past affect her present so much? You mean, this child is really your grandchild? Lily asked, her voice gentle yet filled with confusion. Margaret nodded. Yes, this child is my biological grandchild. But I couldn't reveal the truth until you were ready to face it. David felt like everything was spinning around him. He couldn't understand why his mother had kept the secret for so long. How could his mother's affair affect his present life so much? Then why didn't you tell me? David asked, his voice frantic. Why have you been hiding all this? Margaret was silent, her eyes distant. Because I didn't want you to live in turmoil. If I had told you this, our family wouldn't have survived. And I didn't want to lose what we had built. Lily didn't know how to feel anymore. She looked at David, seeing him consumed by pain and confusion. What should we do now? She whispered. David didn't respond immediately. He stood there in the living room, like a person who had lost everything. A feeling of helplessness spread through him. He turned to look at the doctor, who at this moment seemed to be standing on the sidelines. Doctor, is there any way for us to learn more about this? How can we know for sure about everything? The doctor hesitated for a moment before answering. The only way is to conduct some more tests, but I must warn you that this truth could change everything. You need to be prepared. David nodded, but in his heart, preparation seemed impossible. He felt like he was falling into a deep hole with no way out. And Lily, the only person he could cling to, was also facing a truth too painful to bear. Lily felt as though she were lost in a maze with no way out. We can't keep living in this darkness, can we? She said, her voice weak but full of determination. We have to face the truth, no matter how painful it is. David looked at his wife, his eyes gradually becoming resolute. Yes, we'll face it together. After all, this child is ours. We won't let anyone tear this family apart. The story had begun, and their entire family had to face difficult choices. Secrets from the past continued to be uncovered, and none of them could escape this truth. The room fell silent, as if all the sounds in the world had been sucked away, leaving only the weight of tension pressing down on everyone present. Lily and David sat across from each other, each lost in their own thoughts, with unspoken questions lingering in their minds. Their lives had never been without challenges, but now they had to face a storm they could never have predicted. So what do we do now? Lily asked, her voice soft yet full of concern. She couldn't believe that everything she had trusted could collapse in an instant. Her mother-in-law, a woman she had always respected, was now the one carrying such a huge secret. David was silent for a moment, his eyes looking down at his hands, as if trying to find an answer within them. You're right. We have to face the truth. But the question is there any way for us to keep this family together, or will everything be destroyed? Lily felt a deep pain rise within her. She knew that facing the truth, no matter how difficult, was necessary. But could it save their relationship? David, I don't know if I have the strength to get through this, Lily said, her eyes locked on him, full of hope, but also fear. We've built everything, but now everything is falling apart in front of me. David lifted his head, his eyes filled with resolve. "We will get through this, Lily. No matter what happens, I won't let you face this alone." Margaret remained silent, her hands clenched, her eyes looking out the window as if contemplating everything she had done. "I know this is really hard for you both. But I can't change the past, I can only help you face it." "Help us face it?" Lily asked, her voice bitter. "You've been hiding the truth all these years. You can't just stand there and tell us to face everything that's happened." Margaret bowed her head slightly, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I know, I was wrong not to speak up sooner. But back then, I thought that if everything was kept hidden, it wouldn't hurt anyone. I just wanted to protect you both, and protect this family." David stood up and walked toward the window, looking out. The last rays of the afternoon sun were fading, leaving behind a gray sky. He didn't know how he should feel, whether it was anger or disappointment. What had his mother done to this family? How could she keep such a huge truth hidden? "What are we supposed to do now?" David asked again, his voice tight. "I want to find the truth, but I don't know if we can keep this family together." Lily stood up and walked over to him, taking his hand. "David, I don't know if we can get through this together, but if you want, I will help you find the truth, no matter how painful it is." David turned to face her, looking deeply into her eyes. He knew that things would never be the same again, but at least he still had Lily by his side. No matter how harsh the truth was, he knew they had to face it. "Then we'll face the truth together, Lily. No matter how hard it gets, you and I will face it together." Margaret also stood up and walked over to them. "I know you both need time to think. But I can't keep hiding anymore. The truth will soon come out, and I'll help you uncover it." Lily looked at her mother-in-law, then at David. She had a sense that everything had changed now. A new chapter in their lives was beginning, and whether they could maintain their love and unity, she couldn't know. The days that followed passed in suffocating silence. Lily and David didn't speak much to each other. Everything between them felt suspended in midair, with neither of them daring to face the overwhelming truth that was weighing on the family. During the quiet evenings, they sat together, but each of them was lost in their own thoughts, without a word of comfort, without any reassuring gestures. Mrs. Margaret remained silent, like a ghost in the house. Though she was the one who knew the most about this secret, she could no longer change anything. Her silence only made everything more tense. Lily felt trapped between two worlds. One was David, the husband she loved and wanted to protect, and the other was his family, where Mrs. Margaret had hidden the truth for all these years. She didn't know if she could continue living like this. One morning, David decided that he would face it all. He could no longer live in the shadows. He knew he had to make a decision, even if that decision might shatter everything he had once believed in. He invited the doctor to their house to continue the conversation about what had happened. Mrs. Margaret didn't show up. She just quietly cleaned in the kitchen, not participating in their discussion. David and Lily sat facing each other, their eyes filled with worry. Even though they had decided to uncover the truth, neither could imagine what would happen next. The doctor arrived, his face serious. He sat down, looked at David and Lily, and slowly began to speak. "You've probably thought about this a lot, but I want you to understand that things aren't as simple as we thought. This isn't just about the baby. It's about the past of your family, things that I think you've never known." David sighed, leaning back in his chair. "So what do we do now? We need to find out the truth, but I don't know if we can continue living like this." The doctor looked at David with sympathy. "You need to prepare for what's to come. The truth will not only change your lives, but it will also affect others. You must understand that there are difficult choices ahead." Lily looked at the doctor, her voice soft yet determined. "So, what do you think we should do now?" "I can't keep living in uncertainty." The doctor didn't answer immediately but just looked at them deeply. "You can choose to face the truth, but it won't be easy. The truth about your family's extramarital affair could collapse not only your family's relationships, but also your lives. David looked at Lily, his gaze filled with determination, but also some confusion. We have to face it. No matter what, I won't let this destroy everything. We'll find out everything, no matter how hard it gets. Lily looked at David, unsure if she was strong enough to face it all. But she knew that there was no other choice but to move forward with him. So, what do we do next? She asked, her voice gentle but firm. The doctor nodded, looking at them seriously. First, you need to do another DNA test. This will help clarify the baby's origins. Once you have the results, you'll need to decide what to do next. David nodded. We'll do the test. We have to know for sure. Lily looked at David, a new sense of fear rising in her. She didn't know if their relationship would survive after the test results, but she understood that this was the only way if they wanted to know the truth. In the following days, Lily and David's lives became nothing but hours of waiting. The feeling of restlessness was impossible to hide, and the tension and anxiety made it almost impossible to focus on anything else. Every time they received a call from the doctor, both of them tensed up, their hearts racing, but in the end, the results were just another answer that didn't fully clear things up. One morning, as sunlight began to shine through the window, the doctor called. We have the results. It's time for you to face the truth. Lily looked at David, a sense of confusion overwhelming her. She couldn't imagine what would happen next. The doctor added, the test results are in. But before I tell you the results, you need to be prepared for what you will have to face. David tightly held Lily's hand. His gaze had changed. Though he didn't know what the truth would bring, he understood that things could never go back to the way they were. They both looked at each other without speaking. They knew a new chapter was about to begin. The heavy atmosphere still hung around Lily and David as they sat in the living room, waiting for the doctor to call with the test results. Though both knew they couldn't continue living in uncertainty, their minds couldn't escape the confusion. They had begun the journey to seek the truth, but no one could have prepared them for how that truth would impact their lives. David's phone suddenly vibrated in his hand. He looked at the screen. It was the doctor's number. A chill ran down his spine. Lily sat beside him, her heart full of worry. Although she tried to stay calm, her heart was pounding in her chest. David pressed the answer button, his voice deep and tense. Hello, doctor? The doctor's voice on the other end was no longer calm. David, Lily, the test results are in. And I think you're ready to hear the truth, even though it might shock you. Lily clutched David's hand, feeling like everything in their lives was about to collapse. David didn't know how to respond. He just nodded, although anxiety was creeping inside him. We've double-checked everything, the doctor continued. The baby that Lily is carrying is David's child. But this is not the surprise, because we suspected this from the beginning. What has surprised me and my colleagues is, the baby is not Margaret's child. Lily stared at the doctor through the phone, unable to comprehend. Not Margaret's child? Then who is? Her voice caught, her eyes welling up. The baby belongs to another woman, someone who had a relationship with David 25 years ago. We've found all the information, and while this is not easy to say, it's the truth, the doctor continued, his tone dropping as if sharing an enormous secret. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. 25 years ago? He didn't remember anything about that. Why was this truth surfacing now, just when he and Lily were trying to rebuild their lives? A barrage of unspoken questions began to invade his mind. Lily felt as though a dark cloud had enveloped her. The baby she had loved and protected for so long was now connected to her husband's past in a way she never could have imagined. Could she accept this truth? Could David still be the man she once loved, the man with whom she had shared all her secrets? David felt like he was standing on the edge. What the doctor had said not only disturbed him, but it also pulled him into a spiral he couldn't escape. He knew that things were no longer as simple as before. Every decision, every step from here on out would affect not only his life, but also the family, the people he loved most. "Doctor, I don't understand," David said, his voice breaking. "I don't remember this woman. How could I not know about this?" The doctor was silent for a moment before responding. "It could be that the past was hidden, or perhaps you've forgotten some important details. But what matters is that the truth has been exposed. You both need to decide how to move forward from here." Lily felt a real shock. She had thought her life would change when she discovered the truth about the baby, but now she was faced with an even bigger secret, one that could change everything she thought she knew about David. "What are we going to do now?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. David looked at her, his eyes full of disappointment and disbelief. "I don't know, Lily. I really don't know. Everything is falling apart around us." In the following days, Lily and David didn't speak much to each other. Each of them had their own thoughts, and their lives continued in heavy silence. Everything had changed, but neither of them had found a way to face those changes. They lived in a world where the truth was too harsh, and every decision ahead would shape their future. Eventually, David decided that he would have to face the events of the past. He couldn't keep running from it. No matter how difficult it was, he had to confront the truth, because only then could he move forward. With that determination, David decided to find the woman the doctor had mentioned. He didn't know who she was, but he knew that if he wanted to end the uncertainty, he had to uncover the truth. David stood before the door of a small house on the outskirts of the city, where the doctor had provided information about the woman involved with the baby. He felt an unusual tension in his chest, a sense that he was about to face a part of himself he had never known. Each step he took felt heavier, and the unspoken questions began to invade his mind. Why him? Why this person? Who would he face in this house? Looking back at everything that had happened, David felt as though he were living in a horror movie. Everything before had seemed like a dream, but now it had turned into a reality, an unavoidable reality. Faint memories from the past suddenly resurfaced, forcing him to reconsider everything. He stood before the door for a moment, then took a deep breath, grasped the doorknob, and opened it. The door creaked open. Before him stood a middle-aged woman with smooth, fair skin, her eyes full of curiosity, but also some anxiety. She wore a gray robe, and her eyes showed surprise when she saw David. "Hello, sir," the woman said, her voice gentle but tinged with tension. "Are you looking for me?" David stood still, looking at the woman for a long moment. She had eyes that resembled someone he knew, like a gaze he had seen many times in those faint memories he couldn't fully recall. I'm David. The doctor said we need to talk. I think we have a shared past," David said, his voice deepening, full of exhaustion and confusion. The woman looked at him for a while, as if trying to remember something. "David? Oh, I didn't think we'd meet again, but I understand why you're here." "We met before?" David asked, feeling like he had wandered into a maze with no way out. The woman lowered her head slightly, her eyes fixed on the ground. "Yes. 25 years ago, you and I had a relationship. But I don't want to talk about that past. We don't need to revisit it. This isn't just about you. It's about your family, too." David stood frozen, feeling like everything inside him was slowly shattering. He had no memory of this woman. Why couldn't he remember her? Had he really forgotten an important part of his life? So, the baby. David hesitated, unable to continue his question. He didn't know what to say. The truth was too hard to accept. The woman sighed, looking into David's eyes. "That baby is yours. But you don't remember because we parted ways a long time ago. I never wanted to harm your family, but the truth can't be hidden forever." David felt like he was falling into an endless abyss. Everything, from the secrets of the past to the unanswered questions, now became a reality that he could no longer deny. "So," David choked on his words, unable to continue. He felt like everything was too much to bear, as if everything he had ever believed in was collapsing in front of him. The baby in Lily's womb, which he had thought would be a great joy, was now a reminder of a past that couldn't be changed. The woman stood up and walked toward David. "I know you're in pain, but we can't change the past. What happened, happened. Now, you have to decide what to do with this truth." David couldn't say anything, just standing there, his hands hanging limply, staring at the woman in front of him. Part of him wanted to run away, to go back to his old life, to return to the peace he once had. But he knew that wasn't possible. The past had come back, and it would change everything. "You need to tell your family. This can't be kept secret forever," the woman said, her voice gentle but firm. "If you don't, it will affect many more people." David nodded, the weight in his chest growing heavier. He knew, whether he wanted to or not, he had to face the truth. And this truth wouldn't just affect his life, but the lives of everyone he loved. David returned to his home after meeting with the woman. The fatigue and tension in his body grew with each passing moment. He had learned the truth, but it wasn't something easy to accept. The baby that Lily was carrying was not only his and hers, but also the result of an affair he couldn't remember. And that made everything even more complicated. As he stepped inside, Lily stood in the living room, her eyes filled with concern. She knew David had met with the woman, but she didn't know what he would return with in his heart. She couldn't help but ask, couldn't help but worry. "David, did you meet her?" Lily asked, her voice soft but filled with tension. David looked at his wife, the weight heavy in his chest. He couldn't hide it from her, but he didn't know where to begin. He stood still for a long moment, then slowly replied, "Yes, I met her." Lily felt a chill envelop her, but she tried to remain calm. "What did she say? What do we have now, David?" David didn't look at her, his eyes staring into the empty space ahead. "She said the baby in your womb is mine. She and we had a relationship 25 years ago. And that baby is the result of that relationship." Lily was stunned. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Everything that had been in doubt, all the suspicions, now became the painful truth. She didn't want to accept it, but it was still the truth. "David, why don't you remember her? Why now, when everything seemed to be settling, do we have to face this?" Lily asked, her voice choking. David sat down on the sofa, his hands clenching tightly. "I don't remember her, Lily. She said we broke up a long time ago. But the truth is, it can't be changed." Lily sat beside him, her eyes full of pain. She couldn't help but feel betrayed, but at the same time, she couldn't be angry at David for something he couldn't control. He couldn't remember, and now he had to face a past he didn't understand. "So, what do we do now?" Lily asked, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. "I can't simply accept that the baby is the result of a relationship I can't share with you." David felt like his whole world was falling apart. He couldn't give a clear answer. His love for Lily was real, but everything he had once thought about his family was now in turmoil. He knew this truth wouldn't only change his life, but it would also change how Lily saw him. "I don't know, Lily. I really don't know. Everything is too complicated. But I love you, and I love the baby. I won't abandon you. Don't let this tear our family apart, okay?" Lily looked into his eyes, sensing the sincerity in his gaze. She didn't know if she could continue to accept this truth, but she knew one thing. If they wanted to get through this, they would have to face everything, not just the past, but the future ahead. "We'll have to face everything, won't we?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do it, but if you want, I will try." David held her hand tightly, determination gradually replacing the confusion within him. "I have nothing left to hide from you. Everything is out in the open. Now, the only way forward is to go together." They sat in silence for a while, the suffocating feeling lingering in the room. One part of them still couldn't understand everything that had happened, but the other part knew that love, truth, and family were worth fighting for. Each passing day, the sense of exhaustion in Lily and David grew stronger. Their relationship had been shattered by the painful truth that neither of them could have ever imagined. Although they had decided to face everything, neither of them could clearly see what the future would hold. Could they overcome it all, or would this truth destroy everything they had built? After the heartbreaking conversation in the living room, the atmosphere in the house remained heavy. Everything seemed frozen, with no answers to the big question in their hearts. The days before, when their life had been simple and happy, now felt like distant memories. Lily and David knew that a new path was opening before them, but that path was filled with challenges. Lily sat in her office, looking out the window where the morning light bathed the empty streets outside. She could feel the tension in the air. A sense of loneliness enveloped her soul. Even though David sat right beside her, there was still an invisible distance between them, a distance they couldn't erase immediately. David walked into the room, his gaze briefly meeting Lily's, but he said nothing. Both of them knew that a difficult conversation was coming. They couldn't continue living in silence, but they didn't know where to begin. "I know you're worried, Lily." "I am too," David started, his voice trembling slightly. "But you have to understand that this is not your fault. It's not anyone's fault." Lily looked up at him, her eyes still filled with sadness. "But David, I feel like I'm losing everything. I don't know if we can go on if I can accept that the baby in my womb is the result of an affair." David looked into her eyes, a wave of guilt rising in him. He didn't know how to soothe her pain. He couldn't change the past, and perhaps that's what made everything even harder. "I can't change the past, Lily. But I can change the future. You might not believe me right now, but I will do whatever it takes to show you that I love you and the baby." Lily stood up and walked toward the window. She looked outside, her mind swirling with countless thoughts. "Do you think I can live with this truth? Can I accept that everything has changed forever?" David walked over to her and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "I can't ask you to forget everything right away, Lily. But you have to understand that we've already faced so much. We can move forward if we figure out the way together." Lily turned to look at him, her eyes filled with complex emotions. She wanted to believe David's words, but the pain in her heart was still there. She couldn't easily let go of everything that had happened. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that." David lowered his head, thinking for a moment before speaking. "Lily, no one can overcome everything in one night. But we will do it slowly. Don't rush. We need time, and I will never leave you." They stood in silence for a while, neither of them saying anything more. Lily felt like she was in an internal battle with no end in sight. She loved David, but the pain from the past still kept her from letting go. The baby inside her was no longer just a gift, but a mark of a past she didn't want to face. Finally, Lily sighed. "We need to talk to Mrs. Margaret. We can't keep living in this shadow. She's a part of this story, and we can't avoid the truth any longer." David nodded, his eyes determined. "I agree. We need to face my mother. She's the one who's been hiding everything all these years. And now it's time for her to speak the truth." Lily and David decided they would confront Mrs. Margaret together. Although they didn't know what would happen, they understood they couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. Everything had to be addressed, no matter how painful it might be. Their meeting would be a pivotal moment in deciding whether they could continue together or not. And would Mrs. Margaret be willing to open up and explain everything that had happened, or would she continue to hide the truth? David and Lily sat in the living room, the space around them still silent. A sense of nervousness and tension enveloped the room. They both knew that today would be the day of reckoning, the day when they could no longer avoid the truth. They had gone through many challenges, but the most important thing now was to face Margaret, who had kept a secret about the past for so many years. Margaret was in the kitchen, her hands busy with tasks, but her eyes couldn't hide her worry. It seemed she knew something was coming, and she couldn't avoid it any longer. The whole family was facing a major trial, and she could no longer stay out of it. Lily looked at the clock, feeling as though each second was dragging on endlessly. She could feel the heaviness in her heart, and she knew that today's conversation would change everything. She could no longer live in uncertainty, in the darkness that Margaret had created. David looked at her, his eyes full of determination, but also exhaustion. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice deep and heavy. Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "We have to face the truth, no matter how painful it is. I can't live in silence anymore." David nodded, then stood up. "We'll talk to my mother right now." The two of them walked into the kitchen, where Margaret was standing. When she saw them enter, she slowly turned around, her gaze filled with anxiety. "What is it? Is something wrong?" she asked, but her voice no longer carried the strength it once had. David didn't hesitate. He went straight to the point. "Mom, we need to talk. It's time for you to tell the truth about everything, about the past you've been hiding all these years." Margaret sighed softly, her eyes filled with sorrow. "David, Lily, you don't understand. It's all in the past now, and I don't want to cause any more pain." Lily could no longer hold back. She stepped closer to Margaret, her eyes full of frustration. "No, you can't keep hiding this. We can't continue living in this lie. You have to tell the truth, or we'll never be able to move forward." David looked at his mother, his gaze no longer filled with respect as it once was. "You've been hiding it for so many years, now you have to face everything. Do you think that by hiding the truth, we wouldn't be affected?" Margaret stood still, as if unable to speak. After a moment of silence, she looked at Lily and David, and finally sighed once more. "I didn't want you to endure this, but the truth is, the baby in Lily's womb is David's. And I'm the one who tried to hide this." Lily stood frozen, feeling like everything around her was spinning. Her mind went blank. Everything Margaret said now was no longer a shock, but a hard truth that she could no longer avoid. "Mom, what do you mean?" Lily asked, her voice faltering with confusion. "So, this baby really is David's?" Margaret nodded, her face aging in an instant. "Yes, but it's not what you think. I did everything just to protect you, not wanting you to face this past. David didn't remember, because I tried to hide everything." David looked at Margaret, anger rising within him. "Do you think protecting us means hiding the truth? You've made us live in lies, and now what? It's too late now. You can't just stand there and say you did it all to protect us." Lily felt her heart being crushed. She looked at David, then at Margaret, as if everything had collapsed. She didn't know how to face this truth, didn't know what to do to fix everything. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, her voice weak. David sighed, unable to respond immediately. He turned to look at Lily, his eyes full of pain. "We have to decide, Lily. If we want to move forward, we have to find a way to get through this. No one can change the past, but we can change our future." Lily nodded, but in her heart, she couldn't shake the pain. She loved David, but could she continue living with him when everything had changed so much? "We'll have to live with this truth," Lily said, her voice filled with resolve, but also worry. "We'll get through it, but we have to do this together." Margaret stood silently, looking at her son and daughter-in-law, feeling like a part of her had died. "I'm sorry. I truly am sorry for hiding this from you. I didn't know how to make up for everything." The days that followed the tense confrontation between Lily, David, and Mrs. Margaret were still filled with pain. The secrets had been revealed, the wounds remained unhealed, but now Lily and David knew that there was no turning back. They had to move forward together, even though each step was fraught with difficulties. Lily stood before the mirror in the bathroom, looking at herself. She no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. She felt as if she had lost a part of herself, but at the same time, she could sense the strength slowly rising within her. The truth had been exposed, and no matter how painful it was, she had to face it. She had to choose to love again, not just David, but also herself. She heard the sound of footsteps from David outside the hallway. He walked into the room, silently watching her for a long moment. His gaze was sad but also filled with determination. "Lily, I don't know where to begin," David spoke, his voice trembling. "But I want to tell you that I'm really sorry. I apologize for making you endure all of this. I love you and I don't want to lose you." Lily turned to look at him, her eyes lighting up, but also filled with exhaustion. "You've hurt me, David. Not because of the past, but because of the silence and the things you didn't say. I feel like I've been abandoned all this time, and I don't know if I have the strength to keep going." David stepped closer to her, his hand gently touching hers. "I understand you, Lily. I didn't do enough to make you feel loved. I will never make you feel that way again. I will always be with you no matter what happens." Lily looked into his eyes, and there was no longer anger in her gaze, but exhaustion and pain. But she also realized that she couldn't live in the past forever. Their relationship could only survive if both of them were ready to start over. "We will have to change. We have to learn to love again from the beginning," Lily said softly but with determination. "You and I, both of us, must work on ourselves before we can move forward." David nodded, his eyes filled with understanding and respect, which made Lily feel a sense of peace. She didn't know if they could rebuild everything, but at least she knew they wouldn't give up on each other. "We'll be together, Lily. I'll do everything I can to help us get through this, to rebuild our relationship," David said, his voice stronger. Lily smiled, still worried but ready to move forward. "We'll do it together, David. Both of us. Not because of the past, but for the future." As time passed, and each day brought them closer, Lily and David learned to rebuild their relationship. They no longer tried to deny the past, but instead, they learned to accept it and let it be part of their growth process. Together, they overcame challenges, faced the truth, and healed the wounds. Mrs. Margaret also began to change. Although she still carried the sadness and regrets of the past, she understood that keeping the truth hidden only hurt those she loved. She began to find ways to be closer to her son and daughter-in-law, though she knew she couldn't erase what had happened. However, she understood that forgiveness wasn't something that could happen immediately. It was a long process, and she was willing to walk with them on that journey. Lily and David also realized that love wasn't always beautiful, nor was it always perfect. Love was about getting up after falling. It was about facing pain and choosing each other again. They couldn't change what had happened, but they could create a new future, one that they could trust and love from the beginning. One morning, when the sunlight streamed into their small house, Lily and David sat together in the living room, hands tightly clasped. A sense of peace filled their hearts. They knew that although the road ahead would still be full of challenges, they would walk through it together. And as they looked at each other, they knew that the love they had for each other was stronger than ever before.